Hi everyone, and welcome to video 4 of our 6-part series. In this video, I'm going to talk about the practicalities of a communication device and also planning for modeling. So first, practicalities. Some of these may seem obvious, but if you don't have a plan for them, they can be overlooked, which can affect how much exposure the language learner gets to the communication system. The AAC system should be available and readily accessible at all times. I like to think of the 5-second rule. So if you or the language learner wants to say something, can both of you access the device within 5 seconds? Are you able to get copies of communication boards or printouts of the home screens for ease of access for modeling? Some language learners are happy for communication partners to model on the device, whereas other language learners don't like it when communication partners touch their device. Where will you put the system? You might need to plan where to keep it for different rooms. So if you are in the kitchen, maybe you'll plan that the device is on the kitchen table. If you are in the living room, it might be on the sofa. You also need to plan where you will put the device at night when it's charging to make sure you can get it quickly in the morning. Who is going to use the device? How will you and they remember to model? When and in what activities? This one in particular can take a lot of planning at the start, and you might need to actually write out the plans for who is going to model and what words they're going to model, but it becomes more automatic as you get more used to the device. I'm going to speak about making those plans later on in this video. Another thing to think about is how will you remember to model? So you might have a great written plan to model during meal times or during a book reading activity, but unless you have something to remind you to actually model, you might forget. So you might find it helpful to set an alarm 5 minutes before dinner time if you're planning on modeling then, or you might put a post-it on a book if you're planning to model while reading. How will you remember to charge the device? Will someone specific have the job of charging it every night? This is really important. Devices do need to be charged every night, and they can take a long time to charge. So if we forget to charge it and then we need to charge them in the morning, either the device can't be used for a few hours, or you and the language learner are going to have to sit next to a socket while it charges. Who will carry the device if you're going to a different room or to a different location? This is important because if it's no one's job to remember the device, they can easily be forgotten at home or in the classroom, which limits opportunities for aided language input. So this is probably the most common question we get asked. How do we know what words to start modeling first? In general, it falls into two categories, activity-based and vocabulary-based. So activity-based would be something like deciding to start modeling during a particular activity, such as meal times. And you might decide to model eat, more, like, and finished. So just focusing on those words, you can say, time to eat, dad is eating, you want more, or I'm going to take more, I really like cereal, I think you like cereal too, dad is finished his breakfast now, you are finished eating. And you would say these same types of sentences at each mealtime. Vocabulary-based would be thinking of one or two words such as go and get and modeling them as much as possible during the day, no matter what activity is happening. So for go, you could say, those socks don't go together. Let's go to school. It's your go. Ready, steady, go. And time to go home. And for get, you can say, get your coat, I'll get the door, get in, and dad will get dinner. In my experience, communication partners tend to have a preference for either activity-based like meal times or vocabulary-based like on this slide because it makes more sense to them or because it fits their schedule and routines. So pick whichever one you think would work best for you. There are two great resources from Liberator that have ideas for how you can model different words, whether you are choosing to start by modeling in particular activities or particular vocabulary, and I will link both of them in the description box below. Whether you choose to go vocabulary-based or activity-based, the most important thing to focus on is the interaction and motivation. The AAC system should not be the focus, the interaction and the activity should be. So we need to find out what will be motivating for the language learner and then we need to use aided language input in that motivating situation. Motivation is what drives us to communicate, and it can be doing the things we enjoy, getting our needs met, or social interaction. It's also really motivating for a language learner to know that people are understanding what you're trying to communicate. Remember, whether you choose to start by modeling in specific activities or using specific vocabulary, we need to immerse our language learners in AAC by using the communication system as much as possible. This is more difficult at the start, but it gets easier as you become more familiar with the communication system. It's also important to note that even if you decide to go activity-based and start with mealtimes, for example, the device should still be accessible and near to the language learner at all times. So remember the 5-second rule. We don't want for the language learner to start associating the device only with mealtimes and then get confused when we suddenly have the device in the car. So you can start by modeling at mealtimes, but keep the device out and with the language learner for the whole day. It can be difficult once you have your plan of what you're going to model to not put pressure on the language learner to use the device. Remember, we need to use aided language input lots and lots and lots of times with no expectation on the language learner to do anything, including even looking at the device. Attention can look different, and some people may find it difficult to look directly at new things in their environment. So it might seem like they aren't looking at the device or aren't listening to you model, but this is perfectly okay. As the device becomes a more predictable part of their day, and as you just get on with things while modeling and not make a big deal, they're likely to feel more comfortable. When we start out, we need to make a plan. It can take time at first, but it's important to make this time so we can set ourselves up for success. As we become more used to using aided language input and the setup of the system, we can spend less time on planning. These are two different ways you can write out your plan for modeling. The example of activity-based is on the left, and the example of vocabulary-based is on the right. Once you have your plan for when and what you want to model, it might be helpful to rehearse what you want to say. Find how to access the words and practice saying sentences and modeling with the device. Remember to try and make sure what you are modeling is interesting, functional, and motivating. If interactions with others involving AAC devices aren't enjoyable, meaningful, powerful, or fun, why would the language learner be motivated to pay attention to it or use it? Who should model? Anyone can model on the communication system. It shouldn't be the responsibility of just one person. The language learner needs to see lots of familiar people using the system. So family members, including siblings, teachers and SNAs, any respite staff, their peers in the classroom, and any extended family members that the language learner sees often, such as grandparents or aunts and uncles. Research shows that siblings and peers can be excellent communication partners because they'll most likely be really focused on the interaction and using the device to enhance the communication, rather than just trying to teach the language learner to use the device. If a particular person has a responsibility to model at a certain time, make sure they know this and have reminders in place so that they don't forget. When thinking about what would be useful or motivating for the language learner to be able to communicate, here are some things we can consider. What do you feel the language learner currently finds difficult to understand that they might need help with? Do they understand yes and no, or would they benefit from the communication partner pointing to yes and no symbols to help them understand what we're saying? What is the language learner currently communicating in a way that people not very familiar with their communication would not understand? If they indicate that they're hungry by making a particular vocalization that you would need to know them really, really well to know that they're communicating hunger, it might be useful for them to learn to point to a particular symbol, probably as well as making the vocalization. What types of words does the language learner currently communicate, and do we need to expand this to other word types? A lot of the time, a language learner might already be able to request, so they may have the words for things like toast, pizza, Coke, etc. And we need to think about what other functions of communication or word types would be useful for them. So do they have verbs to direct others? Do they have words to describe things like cold or big? And we can also think about how many words they're putting in a sentence. So if it's just one word, we can think of other words to put with it. So like more toast, cold Coke, like pizza. What words would be useful and meaningful to the language learner? What are they interested in? So this could be words for things they like to do, like swinging or painting. And what words would be helpful to express how they feel? Are they able to stop an activity or ask for a break? Can they let someone know that they like or don't like something? And these can help give the language learner more control over their day. Thank you so much for watching. In the next video, we'll look at steps to expression and the prompting hierarchy.